She didn't ask. She didn't warn. She just reached out and grabbed it. Her fingers closed around the gold chain at Evelyn Thompson's throat, and she yanked hard. The way you rip a weed out of the ground, and the clasp snapped against the back of the elderly grandmother's neck like a slap. The children screamed. The cabin froze, and Delta flight attendant Rachel Bennett stood in the middle of a full airplane, holding a dead woman's necklace in her fist, looking at Evelyn Thompson like she had just solved a problem. She had not solved a problem. She had just made the worst mistake of her life. And Evelyn Thompson was already standing up. What happened on that flight from Atlanta to New York will make your blood boil. And before we go any further, if you are new here, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And drop a comment right now telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's get into it. The day started the way most good days do for Evelyn Thompson, with the smell of her granddaughter's shampoo and the sound of two small voices arguing over who got the window seat. "Grandma, tell her I called it first," said Tyler, who had been talking about this airplane ride for weeks. "Grandma, he did not," said Brooke, who had inherited her grandmother's talent for standing her ground without raising her voice. "I sat by the window on the way to Atlanta. He gets it on the way home. That was the deal." Evelyn Thompson smiled. She had heard this particular argument or some version of it in cars, at dinner tables, and now apparently on airplanes. She reached over and gently patted Brooke's hand, then looked at Tyler with the kind of calm authority that grandmothers build up over decades. "Baby," she said to Tyler, "your sister is right. A deal is a deal." Tyler opened his mouth, thought better of it, and slid into the middle seat without another word. That was Evelyn, patient, measured, the kind of woman who had raised 3 children, buried a husband, and cared for her own mother through the final years of her life, and had done all of it with a grace that younger people spent lifetimes trying to learn. She was not a woman who made scenes. She was not a woman who complained. She was the kind of woman who got through things and got through them quietly, and then went home and prayed and started the next day fresh. But today she was wearing her mother's necklace. It wasn't a flashy piece. It was a gold chain, simple with a small pendant, a tiny cross with a single chip of diamond no bigger than a freckle. Her mother, Eleanor Thompson, had worn it every single day of her adult life. She had worn it to church and to work and to the hospital on the day Evelyn was born. She had worn it in every photograph Evelyn had ever seen of her. And when Eleanor passed recently, the necklace had come to Evelyn, and Evelyn had worn it every day since. She also had on her own wedding band, which she still wore many years after her husband Henry had gone. And Brooke was wearing a small gold bracelet that had been her late mother's, Evelyn's daughter-in-law, gone too soon several years back. And Tyler had on a little chain with a cross that matched Evelyn's, a gift from Eleanor herself on the boy's 5th birthday. They were a family dressed in their history. Their jewelry was not decoration. It was memory. It was love. It was the physical proof that the people they had lost were still with them, still close, still part of every ordinary day and every airplane ride home. None of that, of course, meant anything to Rachel Bennett. Rachel Bennett was in her mid-30s and had been a flight attendant for Delta for several years. She was tall, blonde, with a voice that carried easily over engine noise, and a manner that some of her colleagues described as efficient, and others described as something considerably less flattering. She had been assigned to the Atlanta to New York flight, and she had walked down the aisle doing her pre-departure check with the kind of focused energy that made passengers unconsciously tuck in their elbows as she passed. She stopped at their row. She looked at Evelyn Thompson. She looked at the children. She looked at the jewelry. and something shifted behind her eyes. "Ma'am," she said, her voice professionally pleasant in a way that had just a little too much edge underneath it. "I'm going to need you to remove your jewelry before takeoff." Evelyn looked up. She had been helping Tyler buckle his seatbelt. She thought for a moment she had misheard. "I'm sorry?" "The jewelry," Rachel said, gesturing vaguely at Evelyn's necklace, her ring, the children's pieces. "You'll need to take it off. Store it in your carry-on for the duration of the flight." Evelyn stared at her. "What regulation is that?" "It's a safety concern, ma'am." "A safety concern?" Evelyn repeated very slowly. "Yes, ma'am. Metal jewelry can be a hazard in the event of an emergency." Now, Evelyn Thompson had flown dozens of times in her life. She had flown to visit her sister in Houston, and her grandchildren in Atlanta, and her college roommate in Seattle. She had flown when the rules about liquids changed, and when they made you take off your shoes, and when they started charging for check bags. She had read the safety cards. She had listened to every pre-flight announcement ever made within her hearing. And in all of those years, and all of those flights, she had never once heard anything about removing jewelry before takeoff. She kept her voice even. "I have never heard of that rule." "It's policy, ma'am. Can you show it to me in writing?" Rachel Bennett blinked, just once. A tiny flicker of something, irritation maybe, or recalibration, moved across her face. "I don't carry the policy manual with me, ma'am, but I am authorized to enforce it." "Authorized?" Evelyn said. She felt something settle low in her chest. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter than anger. Something she recognized from a long life of being a black woman in America. The thing you feel when you know exactly what is happening, but you are not yet sure how far it is going to go. "Grandma," Brooke said, quietly. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, baby," Evelyn said. "Nothing's wrong." She looked back up at Rachel Bennett. "This necklace belonged to my mother. She passed away recently. This bracelet belonged to my grandson's mother, who passed several years ago. These are family heirlooms. They are not coming off." Rachel's professional pleasantness developed a harder edge. "Ma'am, I understand that, but—" "No," Evelyn said simply. "I don't think you do." There was a pause, the kind of pause that has weight in it. Across the aisle, a man in his 50s who had been reading a magazine looked up over the top of his glasses. Behind them, a young woman in a window seat stopped scrolling her phone. "Ma'am," Rachel said, and now the pleasantness was almost entirely gone, replaced by something that sounded more like a warning. "I need you to comply, or I will have to speak to the captain." "Then speak to the captain," Evelyn said. Her hands were perfectly still in her lap. Rachel Bennett turned and walked back toward the front of the plane with the kind of stride that means someone is controlling herself carefully. Tyler looked at his grandmother. "Grandma, are we going to get in trouble?" Evelyn put her arm around him. "No, sweetheart, we are not going to get in trouble. We haven't done anything wrong." Then why is she mad? Evelyn thought about how to answer that. She thought about all the ways she could explain it, the easy explanations and the harder ones, the ones that were age-appropriate and the ones that were simply true. She had answered versions of this question before for her own children in different decades, in different contexts, with different details, but always essentially the same shape of question underneath. Why is she mad? Why are they looking at us like that? Why do we have to do something everyone else doesn't have to do? "Sometimes," she said carefully, "people make rules for some people that they don't make for other people. And when that happens, the right thing to do is to stand still and be calm and tell the truth." Brooke, who was old enough to understand more than Tyler did, looked at her grandmother with serious eyes. "Is this because we're black?" Evelyn held her granddaughter's gaze. She didn't look away and she didn't soften it. It might be, baby. I don't know yet. But I know that we have done nothing wrong. 3 rows forward, a white woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses on a beaded chain had heard everything. Her name was Linda Patterson, and she was a retired schoolteacher from Savannah, Georgia. And she had her own quiet opinion about what she was witnessing. She looked at the woman next to her, a younger woman, maybe 40, business clothes, headphones around her neck, and raised her eyebrows. The younger woman shook her head almost imperceptibly and looked back at her laptop. Rachel Bennett returned shortly after, and she did not come back alone. She had brought with her the lead flight attendant, a man named Kevin Lee, who had the look of someone who had been interrupted in the middle of something and was not sure yet how serious this was going to be. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, consulting what appeared to be a seating manifest. "I'm Kevin, the lead cabin crew member for this flight. Rachel has informed me that you're declining to follow a safety directive." "Rachel has informed you incorrectly," Evelyn said. Her voice was so calm, it was almost musical. "Rachel asked me to remove jewelry that has no legitimate connection to any safety policy I have ever heard of. Targeting me and my grandchildren specifically, I asked her to show me the policy in writing. She was unable to do that. I declined to comply with an unexplained, unverifiable demand, and I intend to continue declining." Kevin blinked. He had been expecting a frightened older woman or an irate one. He had not been expecting this. This precise, articulate, utterly composed person who had apparently been paying closer attention than most passengers ever did. "Ma'am, our crew members are empowered to make judgment calls regarding passenger safety." "Under what authority?" Evelyn asked. "Quoted from what specific FAA regulation? What part of the CFR covers jewelry removal?" Silence. "Because I am familiar," Evelyn continued, "with the fact that the FAA requires rings and metal accessories to be removed for medical procedures. I am familiar with the fact that metal detectors at security exist for a different purpose entirely. I am not familiar with any airborne jewelry prohibition. Are you?" Kevin opened his mouth, closed it again. "Is there a problem back here?" The voice came from behind them, from a man 2 rows back who had gotten involved despite himself. He was big, broad-shouldered, maybe 60, and he sounded like someone who spent his professional life asking questions that demanded answers. "Because from where I'm sitting, I'm watching a flight attendant harass an elderly woman about her necklace, and I'd genuinely like to understand what the actual policy violation is." Rachel turned. "Sir, this is a private conversation," the man said. "You're having it in the middle of a full airplane. That's not private. That's public. What is the regulation you're citing?" Another passenger, a woman in her late 40s, spoke up 2 rows on the other side. "I heard the whole thing. She asked to see it in writing, and you said you didn't have it." "That's correct," said Linda Patterson from 3 rows forward, without turning around. Her voice was precise and dry as a school attendance report. "I heard that too." Rachel Bennett's jaw tightened. "I need everyone to mind their own business," she said, and the professional pleasantness was fully gone now, replaced by something raw and defensive and a little bit frightened. "This is a crew matter." "A crew matter that requires an elderly grandmother to take off her dead mother's necklace?" the big man said. "Got it. Makes perfect sense. Sir, if you continue to interfere with cabin crew operations, I will have you removed," Rachel said. Kevin Lee's voice came in sharp and low. "That's enough." Rachel looked at him. Her face was flushed now. Kevin turned to Evelyn Thompson with the measured expression of a man doing rapid damage control. "Mrs. Thompson, I apologize for the confusion. We're going to clarify this situation. And in the meantime, please make yourself comfortable." He took Rachel by the arm and steered her forward with the kind of firm gentleness that left no room for argument. The cabin breathed out. Evelyn Thompson sat for a moment with her hands in her lap, very still. Brooke reached over and took her grandmother's hand. "Grandma," she said, "are you okay?" Evelyn turned to look at her. Her son's child, the spitting image at this age of the girl's late mother, wearing that small gold bracelet that still sometimes made Evelyn's throat tighten when the light hit it just right. "Yes, baby," she said. "I'm okay." But she wasn't done. She reached into her purse, pulled out her phone. Her daughter, Rebecca, was back in New York. Rebecca, who had a law degree and the sharpest mind of any of Evelyn's 3 children, and who called her mother every single morning without exception, and who had a way of getting to the center of a problem so fast that it made lawyers in her firm uncomfortable. Evelyn found Rebecca's number. She pressed call. It rang twice. "Mom, why are you calling? Aren't you on the plane? Is everything—" "Rebecca," Evelyn said, keeping her voice quiet and level, "I need you to listen to me very carefully." The moment Rebecca heard that particular tone, the one that was calm on the surface and vibrating underneath, the one her mother only used when something was genuinely wrong, she stopped moving. Wherever she was, whatever she was doing, she stopped. "Mom, talk to me. What happened?" "A flight attendant just ordered me to remove your grandmother's necklace and the children's jewelry. She cited a safety rule she cannot show me in writing. She came back with a lead attendant. Several passengers have already spoken up. They are now conferring at the front of the plane." A beat of silence. "Mom," Rebecca said, "are you recording this?" "I am not yet. Start recording right now. Don't stop until the plane lands." "What is the airline?" "Delta." Evelyn looked at the ticket still in her hand. She gave Rebecca the number. "Names. Do you have names?" "Rachel Bennett. The lead is Kevin Lee." There was a sound on Rebecca's end, the specific sound of a person sitting down very deliberately and pulling up a laptop. "Mom, I want you to stay exactly where you are. Do not move. Do not let them intimidate you. You have done absolutely nothing wrong, and you are about to have the full weight of everything I know how to do standing right behind you." Rebecca's voice, for just a half second, dropped out of lawyer mode, dropped into daughter mode, the voice of a woman who still heard her grandmother's voice in her own head when she woke up. "The necklace stays on." Evelyn closed her eyes for a second. "Yes," she said, "it does." She hung up and turned on her recording app. She set the phone on her tray table, face up, quiet, doing its job. Then Rachel Bennett came back down the aisle, and this time the professional pleasantness was entirely gone. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, and her voice had taken on a tone that Evelyn recognized immediately, the tone of someone who had talked to someone and come back feeling more powerful than before, whether that power was real or imagined. "I've spoken with the captain. He has authorized me to inform you that your continued refusal to comply with crew directives is a violation of federal aviation regulations, and if you do not remove the jewelry immediately, we will be returning to the gate." Every head in their section turned. "Returning to the gate?" the big man said, and his voice had gotten very quiet in a way that was more alarming than loudness. "Over a necklace?" "Sir, because there are many people on this flight," he continued, "and I'd genuinely like to hear you explain to all of them why we're going back to the gate. The captain's authority on board this aircraft is not the same as federal aviation regulations," said Linda Patterson calmly from 3 rows forward, still not turning around. Those are two different things, dear. The captain has discretionary authority over the aircraft. That authority exists within FAA guidelines, not above them. Rachel stared at the back of Linda's silver head. "Are you a lawyer?" Rachel demanded. "No," Linda said. "I was a high school civics teacher for decades." She turned her head slightly. "But I paid attention." A sound moved through the cabin. Not exactly a laugh, something closer to a collective exhale that had a laugh hiding inside it. Rachel Bennett's face went red. She turned back to Evelyn Thompson, and here was where something changed. Here was where whatever restraint or calculation had been guiding her behavior finally gave way to something more reflexive and more revealing. She leaned in close and dropped her voice to something meant to be intimidating. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, "but on this plane, I am the authority, and you will do what I tell you." The cabin went absolutely silent. Evelyn Thompson looked at this woman. She looked at her for a long moment. The way you look at something you want to see clearly, want to see all the way through before you respond to it. She had grown up in Birmingham, Alabama in the 1950s. She had been told to sit in the back. She had been told to use a different door. She had been told in 100 different ways, and with 100 different words, that she was less than, that she was other, that the rules were different for her and would always be different for her. And she had outlasted every single person who had ever told her so. She was not afraid of Rachel Bennett. "My phone," Evelyn said, her voice perfectly, almost preternaturally calm, "has been recording since you began this interaction. Every word you have said, every word these passengers have said, every word I have said." She glanced at the phone on the tray table, "including what you just said to me." Rachel Bennett looked at the phone. "And my daughter," Evelyn continued, "who is an attorney, is currently on the phone with Delta Airlines' corporate customer service line. She has our flight number, your full name, the lead attendant's full name, and a list of witnesses who have already vocally objected to your conduct." She paused. "Would you like to continue telling me who has authority on this plane?" The silence in the cabin was so complete that someone 3 rows back could be heard putting down a cup. Rachel Bennett stood very still. And then, from somewhere behind her, someone started to clap. A single person, slow, steady, then a second, then the big man 2 rows back joined in, and Linda Patterson, and the woman with the headphones who hadn't said a word until now, and a young couple across the aisle. And before long, the entire section of the plane was applauding. Not wildly, not performatively, but with the genuine, deliberate energy of people who had watched something and had an opinion about it. Rachel Bennett turned and walked away from them. Tyler looked at his grandmother with an expression somewhere between awestruck and deeply confused. "Grandma," he said slowly, "did you just win?" Evelyn picked up her phone and looked at the recording. Still running. She set it back down. "We're not finished yet, baby," she said, but she was smiling. And the necklace, her mother's necklace, that tiny cross with its chip of a diamond hanging right where it always hung, caught the cabin light and threw it back, small and gold and perfectly, stubbornly, beautifully intact. The applause died down. The cabin settled. And for a while, everything was almost quiet. Almost. Evelyn kept her hand near her phone. She wasn't looking at the front of the plane, but she was aware of it. The way you're aware of a door that isn't fully closed. That low, constant attention in the back of your mind that never quite lets you relax. Brooke had her head against the window. Tyler had finally gotten interested in his tablet, and Evelyn sat with her hands in her lap and her mother's necklace against her chest, breathing the way her own mother had taught her to breathe when something was trying to get under her skin. slow, steady from the bottom. Her phone buzzed. Rebecca. She picked it up immediately. "Mom, I'm on hold with Delta Corporate. I've been on hold for some time. I have the flight number. I have both names. I have the incident logged. Are you still okay?" "Still okay," Evelyn said quietly. "Is the recording still running?" "Yes." "Good. Don't stop it. Not for any reason." A pause. "How are the kids?" Evelyn looked at Brooke, who was pretending to look out the window but was very clearly listening to every word. "They're fine. They're being brave. They got that from somewhere." Rebecca's voice carried something in it. Not quite sentiment, not quite humor, but the particular warmth that lives in between those two things. Then it shifted back to business. "Mom, I also called Uncle George." Evelyn went still. "Rebecca, I know what you're going to say. George will. George is a Delta SkyMiles member with a lot of miles and a direct line to their executive customer relations office. And he will absolutely use both of those things right now." "Yes." A beat. "I already texted him. He's already calling." Evelyn pressed her lips together. Her brother George was older and had the energy of a man much younger when he felt an injustice had been committed against his family. She loved him completely. And he gave her a headache. "Tell him not to threaten anyone," she said. "I told him to be firm and professional." "Rebecca, I told him several times." Evelyn exhaled. "All right. Mom, listen. If that woman comes back, and I think she's gonna come back, I need you to let her talk first. Don't interrupt. Let her say exactly what she's gonna say. Let the recording get every word and then respond. Don't let her make you the one who escalated. You understand?" "Rebecca, I've been navigating this my entire life." A beat. "I know, Mom. I know you have." Quiet. "Then I'll call you back the second I get through." Evelyn put the phone down. She looked forward. Kevin Lee was at the front of the cabin, phone to his ear, back turned, speaking in the clipped, careful way of someone who is being evaluated on how they handle this. Rachel Bennett was beside him, arms crossed, weight shifted onto one hip. She was not looking back down the aisle. And then she was. Her eyes found Evelyn's, held them for a couple of seconds. Then she uncrossed her arms and started walking. The big man 2 rows back, his name was Frank, though Evelyn didn't know that yet, sat up straighter. Linda Patterson turned her head just slightly. The woman with the headphones lowered them entirely off her ears. Rachel stopped at their row, and this time she did not start with "ma'am." She started with silence. The deliberate, pressurized kind that is meant to make the other person feel the need to fill it. Evelyn did not fill it. Gasps. "The captain," Rachel said finally, "has made a decision." "What decision?" Evelyn asked. Snorts. "You will be removed from this aircraft." The cabin did not just react, it convulsed. Every person within earshot made some kind of sound or movement. Frank said, "You've got to be kidding me," loudly enough that several rows heard it. A man across the aisle who hadn't said a word until this moment said flatly, "For a necklace." And behind Evelyn, a young woman's voice said, "I'm recording this too." And when Evelyn glanced back, she saw a phone up, camera facing forward. Tyler grabbed his grandmother's arm with both hands. Brooke didn't say anything. She just looked at Rachel Bennett with eyes that were far too old for her age. And the expression on her face was not fear. It was recognition, the specific, heartbreaking recognition of a child who has just understood something about the world that she cannot unknow. Evelyn looked at her granddaughter for a second. Then she looked back at Rachel. "On what grounds?" she said, "is the captain removing me. Non-compliance with crew directives. I have complied with every legitimate directive issued on this aircraft. I fastened my seatbelt. I turned off my Bluetooth device. I stowed my carry-on. I have not raised my voice. I have not made threats. I have not touched anyone." She paused. "Can you say the same?" Rachel's eyes went to the phone on the tray table. "You need to put that away. Passengers are permitted to record interactions with airline staff in the cabin under federal guidelines. Would you like me to cite the specific provision?" Frank, from 2 rows back, said, "I've got it pulled up right here if anyone needs it." Rachel spun around. "Sir, I'm warning you for the last time." "Warning me of what?" Frank said. And he wasn't angry exactly. He was something steadier than angry. Something that had been building and had calcified into something immovable. "Warning me that you'll remove me too? Go ahead. Remove me. And the woman who's recording and the teacher who knows her civics remove the whole plane. Let's see how that conversation goes for Delta." Rachel turned back to Evelyn. And this was the moment. This was the specific, identifiable moment where the situation crossed a line it could not uncross, because Rachel Bennett reached out her hand. She didn't ask. She didn't warn. She reached out and grabbed the chain of Eleanor Thompson's necklace with her fingers, and she pulled. The gold caught. The clasp held for one searing second against the back of Evelyn's neck, and then it didn't. The chain broke free with a sound so small you could barely hear it over the engine noise, and yet somehow, everyone in a wide radius heard it. Brooks screamed. Tyler pressed himself against his grandmother's side and grabbed her arm with both hands and made a sound that was not quite a word, just a raw, terrified noise. And Rachel Bennett stood there with Eleanor Thompson's necklace hanging from her closed fist. The cross pendant swung once, twice. Evelyn Thompson looked at it. She looked at it the way you look at something you cannot immediately process. The way your mind tries to route the information, and the route keeps coming back wrong because the information doesn't fit inside any category you have for the world. Her mother's necklace in this woman's hand. The necklace her mother had worn on the day Evelyn was born. The necklace that had been around Eleanor Thompson's neck in the hospital bed on the last morning of her life, and that Evelyn had unclasped herself carefully with shaking hands before they took her mother away. For a few seconds, Evelyn Thompson did not move. Then she stood up. She was not a large woman. She had arthritis in both knees that her doctor had been asking her to do something about for years. But she stood up the way mountains form, slowly, with an authority that has nothing to do with speed or size, with a weight that comes from somewhere beneath the surface. And when she was fully standing, she looked Rachel Bennett directly in the face from close range, and the entirety of what was in her eyes in that moment made 2 passengers in adjacent rows physically lean away from the interaction. "Give me my mother's necklace," she said. Her voice was so quiet, so absolutely level that it was more frightening than any volume could have been. Rachel took a half step back. The movement was instinctive, unintended. She caught herself and tried to recover, squaring her shoulders, but the half step had already happened and everyone had seen it. "This jewelry, give me my mother's necklace," Evelyn said again. Exactly the same. Same volume, same tone, same absolute stillness. Frank was already out of his seat, not moving toward Rachel, just standing, fully present, occupying the space behind Evelyn with the unmistakable posture of someone who is there. The woman with the phone had come down the aisle and was filming from nearby. Linda Patterson had unbuckled her seatbelt and turned fully around in her seat. Kevin Lee appeared from the front of the cabin at a jog. "Rachel?" His voice was tight, urgent. "Rachel, put it..." She needs to comply. Rachel. He was beside her now, and his voice had dropped to something low and intense. Give her the necklace back right now. A beat. One terrible, suspended beat where Rachel Bennett stood in the center of everything she had created, holding a dead woman's necklace, surrounded by witnesses, with a recording running on the tray table and her colleague's hand on her arm. And many people watching. She held it out. Evelyn took it. She held it in her palm. The broken chain, the tiny cross, that chip of diamond. And she closed her fingers around it, and for just one moment, one single moment that she did not let anyone see, her face changed. The composure flickered. Not fear, not anger. Something older and deeper and more private than either of those. Grief, maybe. The grief of a thing you were protecting being touched by something it should never have had to touch. Then it was gone. Her face reset. She looked at Kevin Lee. I want the captain, she said. In this cabin, now. Kevin Lee nodded. He was already pulling out his own phone. Yes, ma'am. And I want this recorded in the official incident log as of this moment. Yes, ma'am. And I want Rachel Bennett away from me and my grandchildren for the remainder of this flight. Kevin looked at Rachel. Rachel looked at the floor. She walked to the back of the cabin. As soon as she turned away, Tyler wrapped both arms around his grandmother's waist from the side and pressed his face into her arm and didn't say anything. Evelyn put her hand on the back of his head. She sat down, slowly, carefully. The broken necklace still in her closed hand. Brooke reached over and opened her grandmother's fingers gently, looked at the broken clasp, and looked up at Evelyn's face. Can it be fixed? Yes, baby, Evelyn said. It can be fixed, but she broke it. I know she did. Brooke looked toward the back of the plane where Rachel had gone with those serious eyes. Grandma, she said carefully, what's going to happen to her? Evelyn looked at her granddaughter for a moment. Something that should have happened a long time ago, she said. Her phone was ringing. Rebecca. She picked up before the second ring. Mom? Mom, what just happened? I've been trying to call for the last few minutes. Rebecca. Evelyn's voice was steady. She took the necklace off me. The silence on Rebecca's end lasted a couple of seconds. Then, she what? She reached over and took it off my neck. The chain is broken. Another silence. Shorter. Mom, are you physically hurt? No. The kids? Frightened, but fine. Is it on the recording? Evelyn looked at her phone still running on the tray table. Every second of it. What came next from Rebecca was not loud. It was very quiet, in fact. The kind of quiet that is considerably more alarming than loudness. Mom, she said, I need you to stay on this plane. I need you to speak to the captain when he comes. I need you to get every name, every badge number, every statement offered to you. And I need you to understand that what that woman just did is not an airline policy violation. What she just did is criminal. A breath. I'm no longer calling customer service. I'm calling our attorney. Evelyn said nothing. Mom? Call him, Evelyn said. She set the phone down. Around her, the cabin had not returned to normal. It would not return to normal. The people in the rows around her had the specific, activated energy of witnesses, of people who have seen something and know they have seen something, and are in the process of deciding what to do with that. The young woman who had filmed the interaction had gone back to her seat, but her phone was still in her hand. Frank was in his seat, but turned sideways, watching the front of the cabin. Linda Patterson had not turned back around. She was looking directly at Evelyn with reading glasses pushed up on her head and an expression that was entirely quiet and entirely unambiguous. "I want you to know," Linda said from 3 rows forward across the aisle, "that I saw everything, and I will say exactly what I saw to anyone who asks." "Thank you," Evelyn said. "My name is Linda Patterson. I'm from Savannah, Georgia. I am not hard to find." The man across the aisle from Linda, early 40s, suit jacket, had not said a word all morning, looked up from his phone. "Same," he said. "I've got it all on video. The whole thing from when she grabbed it." He paused. "My name is Brian Ellis. I'm a journalist. I was on vacation." He looked at his phone. "I'm not anymore." Frank snorted once, a short, grim sound. Evelyn looked at Brian Ellis. She looked at Linda Patterson. She looked at Frank, who caught her eye and gave a single nod that meant several things at once. "I'm here. I saw it. You're not alone in this." She looked at the young woman with the phone, who nodded too. She looked at the man who had said, "for a necklace," earlier, who had gone back to his newspaper, but had folded it in half and set it in his lap and was not reading it. She had spent her whole life being told that she was on her own, that the people around her would stay quiet, look away, decide it wasn't their business. She had spent her whole life being surprised by the ones who didn't. She looked down at the necklace in her hand. She was going to get this fixed. She was going to take it to the same jeweler in Harlem who had repaired Henry's wedding band for her many years ago, old Mr. Pearson's, who was probably retired by now, but whose son had taken over the shop and had his father's hands. She was going to get it repaired, and she was going to put it back on, and she was going to wear it for the rest of her life. And Rachel Bennett was not going to be any part of that story except the thing that happened that one time that only made the wearing of it matter more. But first, the cockpit door at the front of the cabin opened, and the captain stepped out. He was younger than Evelyn had expected. Salt and pepper hair, the precise and economical movements of someone trained to stay calm in situations that are not calm. His name tag read Captain Robert Santos. He spoke briefly to Kevin Lee, who spoke even more briefly back, and something passed across the captain's face. A small, involuntary tightening around the eyes that people who are not trained to read faces would miss entirely. Evelyn Thompson was very trained to read faces. She watched Captain Santos walk down the aisle toward her, and she saw in his face in those first steps that he already knew. Someone had already told him, or he had heard it himself, or he had been on with someone who had made very clear what the shape of this situation was. He knew. He stopped at their row. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at the children. He looked at her closed hand. "Mrs. Thompson," he said. His voice was measured and direct. "My name is Captain Robert Santos. I understand that an incident occurred in the cabin." "An incident," Evelyn said. He heard it. The weight in those 2 words. "Ma'am, I want to hear directly from you what happened." Evelyn opened her hand. In her palm lay the broken necklace. The chain split where the clasp had been torn. Captain Santos looked at it. His jaw moved once. "Your flight attendant," Evelyn said, "reached over and removed this from around my neck by force after I declined to give it to her voluntarily. The interaction was recorded in full. I have an attorney on the line. I have at least 4 witnesses in this cabin who have identified themselves by name, and I have 2 grandchildren who watched every second of it." She paused. "I would like to know what you intend to do about it." Captain Santos was quiet for a few seconds. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I want to begin by offering my personal apology." "I appreciate that," Evelyn said, "but I didn't ask for an apology. I asked what you intend to do. Something in his expression shifted, not irritation. Something closer to respect. The kind that gets made in a person without their permission, in response to someone who is exactly who they are, without any performance of it. We will be returning to the gate, he said. Frank, from 2 rows back, exhaled. Not to remove me, Evelyn said. It was not a question. No, ma'am, not to remove you. The cabin understood before he said it. People shifted, looked at each other, looked toward the back of the plane where Rachel Bennett had gone. And then, from the back of the cabin, came a sound. A door. A movement. A specific series of footsteps that the entire cabin tracked with their attention, even though no one could see it directly. And Kevin Lee walked back up the aisle alone. Rachel Bennett did not come with him. She did not walk past their row again. She did not collect her things in front of everyone. She was escorted through the back in the quiet procedural way that means the decision has already been made, and the only thing left is the mechanics of it. The cabin didn't erupt. There was no dramatic moment. There was just her absence settling over the rows like a fact. Tyler looked up at his grandmother. "Grandma," he said, "is she gone?" Evelyn looked toward the front of the plane where Captain Santos was speaking quietly into the intercom handset. And then she looked at her grandson. "Yes, baby," she said. "She's gone." Tyler thought about this. Then he nodded once firmly, the way a young boy nods when he has decided something is resolved. But Evelyn Thompson knew better. She looked at the broken necklace in her hand. She thought about her mother wearing it. She thought about Rebecca on a phone right now, talking to an attorney. She thought about Brian Ellis, journalist, no longer on vacation. She thought about the recording on her phone, still running, still collecting everything. She closed her fingers around the necklace. This was not over. Not even close to over. The plane hadn't moved yet. The gate was still there. And whatever was waiting on the other side of this flight, the calls, the statements, the things that were going to be said on phones and in offices and eventually in places considerably more formal than any of that, all of it was still ahead. She was ready. She had been ready for a long time. The plane returned to the gate, not with any announcement that explained what had happened. Captain Santos came on the intercom and said only that there was a crew adjustment that needed to be handled on the ground before departure, and that he apologized for the delay, and that the airline appreciated everyone's patience. It was the kind of language that said everything by saying nothing, and every single person in that cabin knew exactly what it meant. Evelyn sat with the broken necklace still in her hand. She had not put it away, and she had not tried to refasten it. She just held it. Tyler had fallen asleep against her arm, with the sudden, complete unconsciousness that children are capable of even in the middle of a crisis. And Brooke sat on her other side reading nothing, staring at the seatback in front of her with the expression of a child processing something she doesn't yet have words for. The jetway connected with a soft mechanical thud. And then the door at the front of the cabin opened, and 3 people came on board who had not been there before. 2 of them were in Delta uniforms. The third was in a suit. He was a black man, maybe 45, with a badge clipped to his jacket that Evelyn couldn't read from her row, but that clearly carried some kind of authority, because every crew member in the front of the cabin straightened slightly when he walked in. His name, as Evelyn would learn shortly, was Victor Webb. He was Delta's Senior Director of Customer Experience for the Southeast region, and he had been in the Delta Sky Club at the Atlanta airport when Kevin Lee's call came through, which meant that whatever happened next was not going to be filtered through layers of customer service hold music. He walked directly to their row without stopping. "Mrs. Thompson," he said. He did not say ma'am. He said her name, which told her that he had been briefed and had actually listened to the briefing. My name is Victor Webb. I'm with Delta's regional leadership team. I want to start by saying, before you say anything, Evelyn said, I want you to know that this entire interaction is being recorded, and I have an attorney who is currently available by phone if I need her. Victor Webb nodded once. He didn't flinch, didn't recalibrate, didn't look around at the other passengers. He looked directly at her. That's completely appropriate, he said. I would expect nothing less. Frank, 2 rows back, made a sound, something between approval and surprise. I have been briefed on the incident, Victor Webb continued. I have watched video footage recorded by other passengers that was sent to our corporate account a short time ago. I've spoken with Captain Santos, and I want to be direct with you about what I know. He paused. What happened to you on this aircraft was wrong. It was a violation of your rights as a passenger. It was a violation of Delta's policies, and based on what I've seen, it may constitute a violation of federal law. Rachel Bennett has been removed from this flight and has been placed on administrative suspension, pending a full investigation. The cabin, which had been doing a collective impression of people who were not listening, stopped pretending. The man who had said, for a necklace earlier, put down his newspaper entirely. Administrative suspension, Evelyn said, not termination. That determination will be made at the conclusion of the investigation, which will be thorough, and which will... Mr. Webb, her voice was quiet and precise. That woman reached into my personal space and physically removed a piece of my late mother's jewelry from around my neck, after I clearly refused to give it to her. The chain is broken. She opened her hand and showed him. I would like you to explain to me what investigation is needed to determine whether that behavior meets the standard for termination. The cabin was so quiet that the sound of the jetway adjusting was audible. Victor Webb looked at the broken necklace in her palm. He looked at it for a long moment. You're right, he said. You are completely right. Brooke turned her head slowly and looked at the Delta executive with the careful attention of someone recalibrating their understanding of how adults operate. I cannot make a termination announcement to you at this moment, Victor Webb continued, because that is a human resources process with specific legal requirements. What I can tell you is that I am personally going to ensure that this investigation does not take weeks or months. You will hear from us soon. He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a business card on the tray table. That is my direct line, not a call center. My phone. You or your attorney can reach me on that number at any time. Evelyn looked at the card. She didn't pick it up yet. And what about this flight? This flight will depart as soon as we complete a crew adjustment. You will be upgraded to first class, you and both of your grandchildren, for the remainder of the journey. All travel expenses for today will be refunded in full, and Delta will cover the repair of the necklace through whatever jeweler you choose. The necklace is not the point, Evelyn said. No, Victor Webb said. It is not. But it is the least we can do right now. And I want to do it. He looked at her steadily. Mrs. Thompson, I am not here to manage this situation. I'm here because what happened here today is not who we are or who we are supposed to be. And I am genuinely sorry. Evelyn studied him. She was very good at reading sincerity. She had been doing it for decades in churches and courtrooms and hospital corridors and corporate offices. She read him for a moment, and then she nodded once. I'll take the seat upgrade for my grandchildren, she said. Not for me. I'll stay right here. Victor Webb blinked. Ma'am. I said what I said, Evelyn told him. Frank, 2 rows back, laughed. It was a real laugh. Short, warm, the involuntary kind. Brooke looked at her grandmother, and something moved across her face, something that was not quite a smile, but was in the same family as a smile, and would probably grow into one later. Victor Webb stood for another moment, then nodded. "I'll arrange for the children to be moved and for anything you need for the remainder of the flight to be brought to you here." He paused. "Is there anything else you need from me right now?" Evelyn picked up his business card. "Not right now," she said, "but there will be." He understood what that meant. He nodded again and walked back toward the front of the cabin, pausing briefly to speak to Captain Santos. And then the door closed and the jetway disconnected, and the engines, which had gone quiet, slowly began their low rumble back to life. Tyler woke up at the sound of the engines and looked around blearily. "Are we leaving?" he asked. "Yes, baby," Evelyn said. "We're leaving." "Is the mean lady still here?" "No." He blinked, thought about this, closed his eyes again. Brooke did not go to first class right away. She stayed in her seat until the plane was airborne, until the city fell away beneath them, and the sky was just sky in every direction. Then she looked at her grandmother and said quietly, "Did we win?" Evelyn thought about the broken chain in her hand. She thought about Eleanor Thompson, who had grown up in Birmingham in conditions that made a broken necklace on an airplane look like the most minor imaginable inconvenience, and who had nevertheless worn that necklace every single day of her adult life as a quiet, persistent declaration that she was still here, still herself, still unbowed. She thought about what winning meant, and what it cost, and what it left behind when you got it. "We're not finished yet," she said. The same thing she'd said to Tyler before, but this time she said it differently. Not as a warning, but as a fact. The calm, level kind of fact that you don't argue with. Brooke nodded like she understood that completely, which she did. Then she picked up her carry-on bag and moved to first class without any drama about it. Evelyn's phone rang shortly after. Not Rebecca this time. An unfamiliar number with a New York area code. She answered. "Mrs. Thompson?" A man's voice, professional and quick. "My name is Brian Ellis. I'm a senior producer at the Today Show. We received footage of an incident on a Delta flight this morning involving you and a flight attendant. We'd like to speak with you about..." Evelyn pulled the phone from her ear and looked at the number. Then she put it back. "How did you get this number?" A brief pause. "It was provided by a passenger on the flight who wanted to ensure your story was heard. Brian Ellis, the journalist." Evelyn thought for a few seconds. "I don't have a comment at this time," she said. "You're welcome to contact my daughter, Rebecca Thompson, who will be handling media inquiries." She paused. "If she decides to handle media inquiries?" "Of course. Do you have a..." She hung up. The phone rang again almost immediately. Different number. CNN. She turned the phone face down on the tray table, looked at the seat back in front of her, and breathed from the bottom the way Eleanor had taught her. Before long, she had received calls from several news outlets, a text from her brother George that said only, "Evelyn, I just saw the video. What do I do?" And a voicemail from Rebecca that said the attorney was already drafting a formal notice of intent. She'd answered none of the news calls and had texted George back 2 words. "Nothing yet." Frank leaned forward from 2 rows back and tapped her shoulder gently. "You doing okay up there?" She turned. "I've been better." "For what it's worth," he said, "I've been on many flights in my life. I've never said a word to another passenger. I want you to know I don't regret saying something today." "What do you do?" she asked. "I'm a retired circuit court judge," he said. "Atlanta, for decades." Evelyn looked at him. He looked back at her with the particular calm of a man who has spent decades watching people decide how to behave, when they think no one who matters is watching. I saw everything, he said simply. All of it, from the first approach. Evelyn Thompson looked at Frank, this large, quiet, steady man, and felt something move through her that she hadn't let herself feel since the moment the necklace came off. Not quite gratitude, something larger. The specific, particular thing you feel when the world surprises you by being better than you expected it to be. "Thank you, Frank," she said. He nodded and sat back. And then, shortly after, the first twist came. The one that changed the shape of everything. It came through Rebecca, who called with a voice that was doing its absolute best to remain in attorney mode and not quite succeeding. "Mom, are you alone? Can you talk? I'm in my seat. Frank is 2 rows back." "Who's Frank?" "He's a retired circuit court judge who witnessed everything. He's been sitting 2 rows behind me since Atlanta." A pause. "Of course he has." A breath. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "Brian Ellis, the journalist on the plane, I know who he is. He filed a story a short time ago. It's already running." A pause. "Mom, the video has been seen hundreds of thousands of times." Evelyn sat very still. "It's not just the video of Rachel grabbing the necklace," Rebecca continued. "Brian had audio from before that. The whole conversation. He had it all, Mom. From the first time she came to the row." Her voice was controlled, but something was vibrating inside it. "People are calling for Delta to fire her. Not just online. Actual public figures. A senator from Georgia just issued a statement. The NAACP has already released a response." A beat. "Mom, your name is everywhere right now." Evelyn looked at the seat back in front of her. She thought about Eleanor Thompson, about a woman who had worn the same gold necklace every day for decades. Not because anyone was watching, but because she knew who she was. And she did not need permission to be it. "What does our attorney say?" Evelyn asked. "He says we have a strong civil rights claim. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Possibly battery. Physical contact without consent in a state of aggression. He wants to move quickly." Rebecca's voice steadied. "But Mom, it's what I found out about Rachel Bennett that I really need to tell you." Evelyn waited. "She's been reported before," Rebecca said. "This is not the first time." The air in the cabin did not change. The engines kept making the same sound, but something shifted in Evelyn's chest. That cold, clarifying shift that happens when a thing you suspected but didn't want to be certain of becomes certain. "How many times?" "Several formal complaints in recent years. 2 of them were from black passengers. One was from a Latino family traveling with elderly relatives. All of them were, and Mom, this is the word Delta's own internal documentation used, resolved internally." Rebecca's voice tightened on those 2 words the way you tighten a wire. Resolved internally. Meaning buried. Meaning someone saw those complaints and cleared her to keep working. Evelyn closed her eyes. "Which means," Rebecca continued, "that this is not just about Rachel Bennett anymore. This is about what Delta knew and when they knew it, and what they chose to do with that knowledge." The plane was at cruising altitude. Below it, the eastern seaboard was going about its morning, and on a tray table in the row, a retired judge's business card, a Delta executive's business card, and a broken gold necklace were sitting together in the small, specific space of one woman's very clear understanding of what she was going to do next. "Rebecca," Evelyn said. "Yeah, Mom." "How is Uncle George?" A short, involuntary laugh. The exact same laugh as always. The one that sounded just like Eleanor's. He's furious, and he's making calls, and he will not listen to a word I say." "Good," Evelyn said. "Let him." "Mom, Rebecca, listen to me." She paused, made sure she had her daughter's full attention. "We are not just gonna win this for us. Do you understand what I'm saying?" A long beat. Then Rebecca quietly, "I understand exactly what you're saying. Those two families, the ones who filed complaints and were told it was resolved. I want to find them. Mom, I want to find them. Because if they were willing to file a complaint once and got nowhere, they might be willing to speak now that there's a camera and an attorney, and a retired circuit court judge, and apparently a senator from Georgia involved." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "You are terrifying," she said, and her voice was full of a love so complete it barely needed the word attached to it. "I learned from your grandmother," Evelyn said. She put the phone down. She picked up Frank's card and Victor Webb's card and laid them side by side on the tray table and looked at them. Then she picked up the broken necklace again. She thought about the several complaints, several families, several sets of people who had tried to say something and had been shown that what they said didn't matter. She thought about Rachel Bennett being cleared back to full duty several times to go stand in another aisle on another flight and decide which passengers needed to be reminded of who had authority. The anger that moved through her was not hot. It had moved past hot some time ago and settled into something colder and cleaner and more durable than heat. The kind of anger that doesn't yell. The kind that writes things down. The kind that makes calls and keeps records and does not forget. Before long, Kevin Lee came back down the aisle. He stopped at their row and crouched down slightly, speaking in a low voice. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to say personally that I'm sorry for the way this went, for not moving faster when I should have." Evelyn looked at him. He was in his late 30s, with the look of someone who had been running things through his head and was not happy with what he found. "Why didn't you?" she asked, not with anger, with genuine inquiry. He exhaled. "Because she's been here longer than me, and because I told myself it was a policy issue, and she knew the policies better than I did." A pause. "I knew that wasn't true. I think I knew that when she came back the second time. I should have stopped it then." Evelyn let that sit for a moment. "Will you say that?" she asked, "in writing if you're asked to?" He looked at her steadily. "Yes," he said, "I will." She nodded once. He stood and walked away, and Evelyn turned and looked out across Brooke's empty seat to the window. Clouds, blue, the ordinary spectacular indifference of the sky at altitude. She thought about the night her mother died. She thought about sitting in that hospital room in the blue pre-dawn silence and taking that necklace off Eleanor's neck for the last time, and the way the clasp had opened so easily under her fingers. The way the chain had coiled into her palm like something alive that was becoming something still. She thought about putting it on the next morning and the morning after that and every morning since. She thought about Rachel Bennett's hand on it, the chain snapping. She thought about Mr. Pearson's son in Harlem with his father's hands. She thought about several other families who had tried to say something and been told their something didn't count. She thought about Brooke in first class, probably reading her book now, but carrying something in her that wasn't in there this morning. The knowledge of what her grandmother did and didn't do, and why. The specific transmitted knowledge that passes between women across generations, not through conversation, but through witnessing. She thought about Tyler asleep against her arm, and the fact that when he woke up he had asked immediately whether the mean lady was still there. And when told she wasn't, he had closed his eyes again with the matter-of-fact calm of someone who had decided that the adults had handled it. and he could rest. She hoped he would always have that particular ability to rest when the adults handled it. She hoped the world would not spend his life teaching him that he couldn't afford it. The pilot announced their initial descent into JFK. Evelyn Thompson picked up her phone and sent one text to Rebecca. 5 words: "Find the other families." The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Already on it," Rebecca wrote back. The plane began to descend. New York came up slow beneath them, gray and enormous and indifferent and full of everything. And Evelyn Thompson sat in her row with a broken necklace in one hand and a retired judge's business card in the other, and she was not finished. Not even close. They landed at JFK. The wheels hit the runway with that familiar shudder, and the cabin shifted forward. And Tyler woke up immediately the way he always did, fully, like a switch, and looked at his grandmother with clear eyes. "Are we home?" "Almost," Evelyn said. "Almost, baby." The plane taxied and she used every one of those minutes. She had voicemails she hadn't listened to yet, text messages and missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize that had left no messages at all. Rebecca had texted twice more since the descent began. The first said the attorney had already made contact with Delta's legal department. The second said simply, "Mom, turn on the news when you land." Evelyn looked at that text for a long moment. Then the plane stopped, and the seatbelt sign went off, and the cabin erupted into the usual choreography of people standing too fast and opening overhead bins and checking their phones all at once. Frank stood up behind her and touched her shoulder lightly as people began to bev. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I want to give you something before we get off." She turned. He was holding a folded piece of paper. His own notepad paper, she realized, from a small leather notepad she hadn't noticed him carrying. He had written on it in a precise, clear hand. She took it and unfolded it. It was a statement. 4 paragraphs. What he had witnessed in order. Signed at the bottom, "The Honorable Frank Washington, Circuit Court Judge, Fulton County, Georgia, retired." She read it once, looked up at him. "I've already sent a copy to the FAA's Passenger Rights Division," he said, "from my phone during the flight." Evelyn held the paper. "My daughter is an attorney," she said. "I know," he said. "I heard." A brief smile. "She sounds like she knows what she's doing." "She does," Evelyn said. "She gets it from her grandmother." She folded the statement and put it in her purse with Victor Webb's card and Brian Ellis's missed call and all the other pieces of this morning that were accumulating into something she hadn't fully named yet, but could feel the shape of. Linda Patterson was waiting in the aisle when Evelyn stepped out of her row. She handed Evelyn a folded piece of paper, too. Her name, her phone number, her email, and the name of the school she had taught at for decades. As if she knew that institutional credibility was going to matter. "Savannah, Georgia," Linda said. "Like I told you." "I remember," Evelyn said. "My late husband was a civil rights attorney," Linda said. "He worked cases in the 80s. I know what this kind of thing costs the people who pursue it, and I want you to know that what I saw today is worth pursuing." Evelyn looked at this woman. Silver hair, reading glasses, small gold earrings, probably in her 70s or older. She had sat in that seat this morning and heard everything and said exactly the right things at exactly the right moments and had asked for nothing in return. "Thank you," Evelyn said, and meant it in a way the word couldn't fully carry. Brian Ellis was already in the jetway on his phone when they came through. He looked up when he saw Evelyn and lowered the phone. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "I owe you a disclosure. I filed a story while we were in the air. It's already running. I should have asked first." Evelyn looked at him. "Yes," she said. You should have. He absorbed that. I'm sorry. The story needed to be out before anyone could shape the narrative around it. I understand the logic, she said. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm saying you should have asked. He nodded. Fair. A pause. My editor wants an interview. A real one. On record, not a quote. A full story. Your side. Your words. Talk to my daughter, Evelyn said and kept walking. She came through the gate into the terminal and Rebecca was there. Not on the phone, not on her laptop. Just there. Standing from the gate with both arms already open. And when Evelyn saw her, she felt something that had been held very tightly inside her chest. Since the incident that morning began very slowly to release. Rebecca Thompson was tall and sharp-featured, and dressed in the kind of put-together way that meant she'd left a meeting or a call to be here. But she had left it without hesitation. She had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's jaw. And she was crying before Evelyn had taken a few steps toward her, which was notable because Rebecca Thompson did not cry easily and did not do it in public under any circumstances that could be avoided. They held each other without speaking for a moment. Tyler immediately threw himself at his aunt's legs. Auntie Rebecca, a lady broke Grandma's necklace. Rebecca held her mother with one arm and pulled Tyler in with the other. I know, baby, I know. Brooke came through behind them, carrying her own bag and Tyler's, and Rebecca reached out and got her too. And for a moment, all four of them were tangled together in the middle of the JFK arrival hall while people flowed around them with their rolling bags and their phone screens and their urgencies, paying no particular attention to this knot of family that had just come through something. Then Rebecca pulled back and looked at her mother's face. Are you hurt? She asked. The attorney voice was gone. This was just Rebecca. No, Evelyn said. The necklace? Evelyn opened her purse and showed her the broken chain. Rebecca's jaw tightened. She looked at it for a long moment, and then she looked at her mother. And something passed between them that was too old and too deep to be put in any language currently in use. The kind of communication that happens between a woman and her daughter when both of them have loved the same person their whole lives, and that person is gone now. And the only things left of her are exactly the things that need protecting. Victor Webb called me shortly after we landed, Rebecca said, shifting back. Delta has placed Rachel Bennett on unpaid suspension. Their legal department has already reached out to our attorney. I think they know what they're sitting on. They should, Evelyn said, because I do. The other families, Rebecca started. You found them. One. Rebecca's eyes sharpened with the specific focus of someone who has been working a problem and is close. Her name is Lisa Carter. She flew Delta out of Charlotte a couple of years ago. She filed a formal complaint about Rachel Bennett. The exact same pattern. Jewelry. A different reason each time. Lisa is a nurse. She was flying home from a medical conference. Rachel told her her stethoscope chain was a safety hazard and demanded she remove it. Rebecca paused. Delta's response was a 3-line form letter and a small flight credit. Evelyn stopped walking, just for a moment, just to let that sit. A small credit, she said. A small credit, Rebecca confirmed. Has anyone spoken to her? Our attorney made contact a short time ago. She's been watching the news. She already said yes. They were moving through the terminal toward the exit. Rebecca's hand on her mother's arm, the children just ahead. Evelyn's phone rang again. Another number she didn't know. Different area code. She answered it this time. Mrs. Thompson, this is Sharon Moore. I'm the director of the Eastern Region Legislative Affairs Office for the NAACP. We've been in contact with your daughter this morning, and I want you to know that our national legal team is available to you immediately at no cost if you choose to pursue this. Evelyn had been a member of the NAACP for many years. She had paid her dues every year since decades ago, in good times and tight times both, because her mother had told her that you pay your dues not for what it gives you, but for what it means you're part of. She had never once expected to receive this particular call. "I appreciate that deeply," she said. "Please speak with my daughter." She handed the phone to Rebecca, who took it with one hand while pulling up something on her own phone with the other, moving with the efficient, multi-tracked intensity of a woman who has shifted from personal to professional without losing either. They reached the exit, and that is when the cameras were there. Not the overwhelming bank of equipment you see at press conferences, just 3 news crews, local affiliates, set up with the specific preparedness of people who had been tipped off that this was the right exit at the right time. Brian Ellis, she realized, or possibly George, who was standing nearby looking exactly as described, which was to say furious and making calls, and who looked up when he saw Evelyn and said her name across the distance in a voice that carried considerably more grief than fury when he actually saw her face. Evelyn looked at the cameras. She thought about what Rebecca had said on the plane. Your name is everywhere. She thought about not wanting that, about the deep, genuine preference of a private woman who had spent a long time solving her problems without an audience. She thought about Lisa Carter and her small flight credit. She thought about the third family still unfound. She walked directly toward the cameras. Rebecca caught up beside her in a couple of steps. "Mom, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Evelyn said. She stopped in front of the first reporter, a young woman with a microphone who looked young and who had the nervous, urgent energy of someone covering her first genuinely significant story. "Mrs. Thompson," the reporter said, "can you tell us what happened on the plane this morning?" Evelyn looked at the camera. She thought about how to begin. She thought about Eleanor Thompson, who had once told her that the most dangerous thing a black woman could do in America was be ordinary in public. Not angry, not threatening, just ordinary and present and unbowed. Because ordinariness in a black woman was somehow still, in this country, a provocation to certain kinds of people. "I was sitting with my grandchildren," Evelyn said, her voice absolutely clear, "wearing my late mother's necklace. She passed recently. A flight attendant demanded I remove it. I declined. She took it off me by force. She held up the broken chain so the camera could see it. The reporter stared at the chain for a moment. Then, what would you like to see happen as a result of today?" "I would like Rachel Bennett to be terminated," Evelyn said. "I would like Delta Airlines to conduct a genuine, transparent investigation into how many other passengers she treated this way and how many complaints were filed and buried. I would like Lisa Carter, a nurse from Charlotte who filed a complaint against this same flight attendant a couple of years ago and received a small voucher, to receive the same attention her complaint deserved then." She paused. "And I would like my grandchildren, who watched all of this morning, to understand that you do not have to accept being treated this way, that your history, your family, your mother's jewelry, none of it is subject to someone else's authority to remove." She was aware of Brooke standing just behind her left shoulder. She could feel her granddaughter listening to every word. The second camera had come in closer. The reporter from the second outlet was already talking in a low voice to Rebecca. George had appeared at Evelyn's side, and she could feel the energy coming off him. That specific George energy that was equal parts indignation and love and helplessness in the face of both. And she reached over and took his hand without looking at him. And he went quiet immediately and held on. "There is a third family," Evelyn continued. "Another passenger who filed a complaint against this flight attendant. that we have not yet identified. If you are that person and you are watching this, please reach out to my daughter. We are standing together on this. You are not alone." She was done talking to the cameras. She turned away before anyone could ask another question, and Rebecca stepped in behind her to handle whatever came next. And George was immediately on his phone again, and Evelyn walked through the glass doors and into the New York air and stopped. Brooke appeared beside her. She had both bags again, and she stood next to her grandmother and looked out at the street and was quiet for a long moment. "Grandma," she said, "who is Lisa Carter?" "A woman who tried to do what's right and got ignored," Evelyn said, "until today." Brooke processed this. "Is that what you meant on the plane about not being finished just for us?" Evelyn looked at her granddaughter. "That's exactly what I meant," Evelyn said. Rebecca came through the door shortly after, phone in hand, and the expression on her face stopped Evelyn cold. Not good news, not bad news exactly. Something that was both layered on top of each other. In the specific way that things are, when a situation has developed faster and larger than even your best preparation accounted for. "Mom," she said, "I just got off the phone with Victor Webb." Evelyn waited. They found the third family. Evelyn held completely still. "Delta found them first," Rebecca said, "before we did. A family from Memphis, mother and 2 daughters. Rachel Bennett told the mother her daughter's earrings were a distraction to other passengers. A beat. The mother is a retired schoolteacher. Her name is Helen Bridges. She filed a complaint and Delta sent her a form letter." Rebecca looked at her mother. "She saw the news this morning. She called Delta directly. She had kept the form letter. She'd kept every email. She has names and dates and seat numbers." The air moved through Evelyn in a way she felt physically. Not quite a shiver, not quite a breath, but the specific interior movement of a thing clicking into place. Several families, all women, all black, all told to remove something from their bodies, all told afterward that it had been handled. One of them, at least, who had kept every piece of paper. "Helen Bridges kept her records," Evelyn said. "For some time," Rebecca confirmed. "She told the Delta representative this morning that she kept them because she knew one day it would matter. She just didn't know when." George, who had been listening, stopped pacing. He looked at his sister. His face did something complicated. And then he sat down on a bench and pressed both hands over his mouth for a moment. "Mama would have," he started and didn't finish. "I know," Evelyn said. "She would have gone down there herself, personally." "I know, George." He exhaled, nodded, stood back up, picked up his phone again. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. His voice had changed. The frantic energy had settled into something quieter and more useful. "Right now?" Evelyn looked at him. "I need you to take these children somewhere and get them lunch. They've been on their feet since early this morning and they're hungry, and they've seen enough today." George looked at Tyler, who was leaning against the wall with the expression of someone who would very much like a cheeseburger. "I can do that," George said. "Rebecca and I will meet you in a short while." George put his hand on the back of Evelyn's head, the way he had done since they were children, not a pat. Something more deliberate than that, the specific touch of a brother making sure his sister is still there. "You good?" he asked quietly. "Getting there," she said. He nodded, called the kids, they left. Rebecca waited until they were gone, then turned to her mother. "We have a call soon with our attorney, the NAACP legal team, and a representative from Helen Bridges' side, because Helen already has an attorney too." Evelyn looked at her. "She got one after Delta sent her the form letter," Rebecca said. She just never had enough to move forward with until now. And there it was, the moment that arrives in every situation like this one, when what looked like one woman's personal fight on one day reveals itself to be something that was already years in the making, already building, already waiting for the right moment to have enough weight behind it to move. Evelyn thought about sitting on that plane this morning, helping Tyler with his seatbelt, about Brooke arguing for the window seat, about the necklace against her chest, and the routine of putting it on that morning, and the specific, ordinary way the day had started. She had not been looking for this. She had not wanted this. She had simply been on her way home. She reached into her purse and found the broken necklace. She laid it across her palm one more time and looked at it. The chain was clean and gold, and the damage was precise. Just the clasp broken where it had been pulled. Everything else intact. The cross still there. The diamond chip still catching light. She closed her fingers around it. "Let's go," she said. Rebecca flagged a car. They got in. The city moved past the windows, the enormous, indifferent, complicated city that had been Evelyn's home for many years. And Evelyn held the necklace in her closed hand the whole way, the same way she had held it since the moment it was taken from her, and the moment she took it back. Before long, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a news alert. She looked at it. Then she turned the screen so her mother could read it. Delta Airlines issues public statement regarding the incident. Airline confirms flight attendant Rachel Bennett has been terminated, effective immediately pending full internal investigation. CEO personal apology forthcoming. Evelyn read it twice. She did not cheer. She did not exhale dramatically. She thought about Lisa Carter's small voucher. She thought about Helen Bridges keeping her paperwork for some time by herself, waiting. She thought about the form letters and the cleared complaints in the next flight, and the next family and the specific institutional machinery that had protected Rachel Bennett several times and sent her back out into a cabin to do it again. Terminated pending investigation was not the end. It was not even close to the end. But it was the beginning of something real. And Evelyn Thompson had spent enough of her life knowing the difference between those two things to appreciate this moment for exactly what it was. Not a victory, but a door opening. And on the other side of it, several families and one attorney and one retired circuit court judge and one civics teacher from Savannah and one journalist who was no longer on vacation. All of them walking through it together. She put the phone down. Outside the window, New York was doing what it always did, which was everything at once, loudly, without waiting for anyone to be ready. Evelyn Thompson had been ready for a long time. The car pulled up to Rebecca's building. They had a short time before the call. Rebecca was already on her phone in the elevator confirming the conference line number with their attorney, whose name was James Whitaker, and who had been practicing civil rights law in New York for over 2 decades, and who had, according to Rebecca, taken one look at the recording and said 4 words. "This is very clean." In attorney language, that meant the kind of evidence that doesn't require interpretation. The kind that speaks for itself in any room you carry it into. Evelyn stood in the elevator with her purse in her hand and her mother's broken necklace still in her pocket and said nothing. She was conserving something, not energy exactly, more like intention. The specific gathering of a person who knows that what comes next is going to require all of her and who is making sure all of her is present and available. The elevator opened. They went in. Rebecca's apartment was the organized, purposeful kind. Bookshelves that were actually used, a desk that had seen serious work done on it, and a kitchen table that had served as a war room on more than one occasion. She had it set up in under a few minutes. Laptop open, notepad, 2 pens, a glass of water for her mother that she set down without asking. Evelyn sat, drank, looked at the notepad. "Tell me about James Whitaker," she said. Rebecca pulled up a chair. "Over 2 decades in civil rights litigation. He's won several cases against major carriers, some of them airline-related discrimination. He's been on the phone with the NAACP legal team since this morning." A beat. "He already has a copy of Frank Washington's statement. Frank emailed it directly to his office. James called Frank personally. They talked for some time." "Frank didn't tell me that," Evelyn said. "Frank strikes me as someone who handles things and then doesn't announce that he handled them," Rebecca said. Evelyn thought about a retired circuit court judge from Atlanta sitting in his seat 2 rows back, filling out his notepad in careful handwriting while the engine hummed, sending it to the FAA and a civil rights office before the wheels touched the ground, asking for nothing, expecting no recognition. She made a mental note to call him. The conference line opened right on time. James Whitaker's voice was calm and deliberate, the kind that takes up space in a room without needing to be loud. He had a New York accent underneath a lifetime of professional neutrality, and he spoke to Evelyn directly, not to Rebecca, which she noted. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to begin by saying I've listened to the full recording twice. I've watched both videos, yours and Brian Ellis's. I've read Judge Washington's statement. I've reviewed the formal incident report filed by Captain Santos, which Delta's legal department transmitted to us." A brief pause. "This is one of the most thoroughly documented passenger civil rights violations I have seen in over 2 decades of practice." Evelyn said, "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means that what Rachel Bennett did constitutes, at minimum, battery under New York state law. Physical contact that was harmful and offensive and made without consent. It also establishes a strong foundation for a federal civil rights claim under Section 1981, which covers racial discrimination in the making and enforcement of contracts, including airline passenger contracts." Another pause. "It means that Delta's pattern of receiving and dismissing complaints about this specific employee creates what we call institutional liability. They cannot claim they didn't know. They knew. They chose inaction several times." The NAACP representative on the line, Sharon Moore, whom Evelyn had spoken to briefly at the airport, spoke next. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to add that we have already identified media contacts at the Associated Press, the Washington Post, and several network affiliates who are following this story as of this morning. This is no longer a local incident. This is national." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "How is Lisa Carter?" A slight pause. James said, "She's been in contact with our office. She's steady. She's angry, appropriately so. And she wants to move forward." "And Helen Bridges?" Helen's attorney, a woman named Susan Grant, who had a Memphis number and a voice like someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment, said, "Helen is ready. She has been ready since Delta sent her that letter. She said this morning that she didn't keep those papers because she was certain something would happen. She kept them because she refused to pretend it hadn't." Evelyn closed her eyes for a second. She thought about several women. Herself, sitting in the row with her grandchildren. Lisa Carter, a nurse flying home from a conference, told her stethoscope chain was a hazard. Helen Bridges, a retired schoolteacher, watching her daughters told their earrings were a distraction. Several different flights, several different years, several different reasons that all had the same shape underneath. "What do we do next?" Evelyn asked. "We file," James said simply. "We file a joint civil complaint on behalf of all of you. We file it as a pattern of discriminatory conduct, not several separate incidents. Delta's internal records, which their legal team was required to produce this morning under our preservation letter, show that Rachel Bennett received formal complaints from a total of several passengers over recent years. Several, Mrs. Thompson, not a few. Some of those complaints were from Black or Latino passengers. Several were closed without investigation. The line was silent. Rebecca wrote something on the notepad and turned it toward her mother. It said, "Several." Evelyn looked at the number. She had thought a few. Several families had been a weight she felt in her chest. Several was a different kind of weight entirely. Several was not a pattern that could be explained away. Several was a policy. Several was a decision made repeatedly by people who had the power to stop it and chose not to. "When?" Evelyn said. "We can file by the end of the week," James said. "But I want to be honest with you about what that means. It will be public. It will be loud. Delta's legal team is already working to manage the narrative. Filing this week keeps the pressure exactly where it needs to be. But it also means your name and Lisa's name and Helen's name are going to be in every major newspaper in the country within a day of filing." "They're already there," Evelyn said. "Yes," James agreed. "They are." "Then by the end of the week," she said. Rebecca nodded once. The call ended shortly after. Rebecca closed the laptop. She looked at her mother. For a moment, neither of them said anything, and the apartment was quiet, with the particular quiet of after. The specific silence that falls when a long, impossible, exhausting morning has finally shifted into something that has direction and weight and forward motion. "You okay?" Rebecca asked. "Several families," Evelyn said. "Several complaints. Several families confirmed so far. The others, find them," Evelyn said. "If they're willing, no pressure on anyone who's not ready, but give them the option." She paused. Nobody should have to do this alone. Rebecca looked at her mother for a long moment. "You know this is going to take a while," she said. "Months, maybe longer. I know. It's going to be uncomfortable. They're going to look into everything about you. Your finances, your history, your—" "Rebecca." Evelyn looked at her daughter. "I am an older woman. I grew up in Birmingham. I have been audited, followed, questioned, and dismissed more times than I can count. A team of corporate attorneys going through my credit history is not going to be the hardest thing I have faced. A beat. Not even close." Rebecca's eyes went bright for a moment. She pressed them steady, nodded. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Mom." They met George and the children at a diner on Amsterdam Avenue a short time later. Tyler had syrup on his shirt and the satisfied look of someone who had fully transitioned from the morning's drama into a plate of pancakes, which was, Evelyn thought, exactly the right response to the day. Brooke was sitting across from her uncle, and when Evelyn came in, Brooke looked at her with a very specific question in her eyes. Evelyn sat down, looked at her granddaughter. "We're filing a lawsuit," she said simply, "by the end of the week. Several families together." Brooke absorbed this. "Will you win?" "We will do everything we can," Evelyn said. "That's not the same as winning, but it's the part we control. And the other part is up to judges and juries and how hard James Whittaker works." A pause. "He seems like he works very hard." Brooke looked down at the table, then back up. "Grandma," she said, "can I come when you file? I want to be there." Evelyn looked at her. "Asking to be present for the next part." "Yes," Evelyn said. "You can come." George, who had been listening, reached across the table and covered his sister's hand with his. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The call came later that day. Not from Rebecca, not from James Whittaker, not from a news network or the NAACP or a senator's office. It came from an Atlanta number that Evelyn didn't recognize, and when she answered it, the voice on the other end was a woman's. Older, a little tired, a little careful. The voice of someone who had been rehearsing what she was going to say. and wasn't entirely sure she was ready to say it. "Mrs. Thompson," the woman said, "my name is Barbara Morrison. I was on your flight this morning." Evelyn sat up straighter. "I was in a row farther back," Barbara said. I didn't say anything. I want you to know that I'm calling because I've been sitting with that all day. I didn't say anything when it was happening, and I don't feel right about that." The specific texture of what Evelyn felt in that moment was complicated. It was not anger, and it was not forgiveness, and it was not absolution, and it was not dismissal. It was something that required all of those things to be present at once, without any of them taking over. "What made you call?" she asked. "My daughter sent me the video," Barbara said. "She saw it online before I even landed. She called me screaming." A pause, and her voice wobbled slightly. "And I had to tell her I was on that plane, that I saw it happen, and she asked me what I did." A beat. I didn't have an answer for her. Evelyn said nothing. "I know I can't take it back," Barbara said. I don't know what to do with this feeling of having been there and said nothing." Evelyn thought about this. She thought about all the rows of passengers this morning, the ones who spoke up, the ones who filmed, the ones who stayed silent. She thought about how easy it was to be angry at the silence and how complicated the silence actually was. The calculations people make in those moments, the fear, the uncertainty that telling yourself it will resolve on its own, or that it's not your place, or that you didn't see enough to be sure of what you saw. "Barbara," she said, "do you have children?" "3," Barbara said, surprised by the question. "And 4 grandchildren." "Then let me ask you something. If it had been you in that row this morning, if it had been your grandchildren, would you have wanted someone farther back to say something?" A long silence. "Yes," Barbara said quietly. "I would have." "Then you know," Evelyn said, "what you're going to do differently next time." Another silence, not the heavy kind. Something lighter and harder to name. "Thank you," Barbara said. "Don't thank me," Evelyn said. "Just do it next time." She hung up. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. Then she put it down and picked up her glass of water and looked at nothing in particular and thought about how many Barbaras there had been over the years. How many people farther back watching, calculating, staying quiet. How many of them had gone home afterward and felt this exact same thing and never made a call. How many next times had come and gone without the lesson carrying forward. She hoped this one would be different. She suspected it would be, for Barbara Morrison specifically. Some lessons land, some don't. You can't control which kind you're giving while you're giving it. Later that evening, Rebecca called from the other room where she had been working. "Mom, you need to see this." Evelyn walked in. Rebecca turned the laptop toward her. Delta's CEO, a man named Richard Harrington, who had been in the role for some time, had recorded a video statement. Not a press release, a video. He was sitting at a desk, no tie, looking directly into the camera. And he was not using the careful corporate language of managed crisis communication. He looked like a man who had watched the recording himself and had felt it. "What happened to Mrs. Evelyn Thompson and her grandchildren on the flight this morning is not policy failure," he said. "It is not a training failure. It is a moral failure. And it happened on our watch to a passenger who was traveling with her family, wearing her late mother's necklace, doing nothing wrong. Rachel Bennett has been terminated. That termination is permanent and is not pending any review." He paused. "I also want to say directly, Delta failed Mrs. Thompson and her family, not just today, but in previous years. when passengers brought complaints to us that we should have taken more seriously and did not. I am ordering an immediate and complete review of every passenger complaint filed against cabin crew in the last several years. Every complaint, every one." He looked into the camera one more time. "Mrs. Thompson, if you're watching this, I am sorry. And I mean that as a human being, not as a CEO." The video ended. Rebecca and Evelyn sat with it for a moment. "He did not have to say the previous years," Rebecca said slowly. "His legal team almost certainly told him not to." "But he did," Evelyn said. "He did." Rebecca looked at her mother. "James says it actually strengthens our position because it's a public admission of prior knowledge, but..." She paused. "I don't think he said it for legal strategy. I think he said it because it was true, and he knew it was true. And he decided truth mattered more than strategy today." Evelyn looked at the frozen image of Richard Harrington on the laptop screen. "Good," she said. "Then we'll hold him to it." The twist that arrived that evening did not come from Delta. It did not come from the NAACP or the press or the senator from Georgia. It came from Brian Ellis, who texted Rebecca a link with 3 words before it. "You need this." Rebecca opened it, read it. Her face went through 3 separate expressions in about a short time. Shock, then understanding, then a slow, cold fury that settled into something very still. She handed the phone to her mother. It was an article. Brian had been reporting all day, pulling threads. He had found Rachel Bennett's social media history. Not her public accounts, but posts from a private account that had been screenshotted and sent to him by a former colleague of Rachel's who had watched the news that morning and decided to make a decision. The posts went back several years. They were not subtle. They were not ambiguous. They were the specific, unguarded language of someone who believed in the privacy of what they thought was an unseen space. Exactly what Evelyn Thompson had suspected from the first moment Rachel Bennett stopped at the row and looked at her family with that particular expression. The posts used language that Evelyn had heard before, language her mother had heard, language her grandmother had heard, the language of a specific ancient contempt that changes its vocabulary over decades but never changes its meaning. She read it once, put the phone down. She was going to do this, Evelyn said. It was not a question. She came to work that day already carrying this, Rebecca said. Her voice was very controlled. The plane was not random. The jewelry was not random. She looked at you and she saw what she had always decided she saw, and she acted on it. Evelyn sat back. She thought about Tyler with his seatbelt. She thought about Brooke arguing for the window seat. She thought about the specific innocence of that argument. 2 children negotiating a fair arrangement on their way home with their grandmother, wearing their family's gold. She looked at my grandchildren, Evelyn said. Yes, Rebecca said quietly. She looked at my grandchildren and she decided. Yes. The room was very quiet. Send it to James, Evelyn said. Already done, Rebecca said, while you were reading. Later that evening, Evelyn called Frank Washington. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Thompson, I was hoping you'd call. You sent your statement to James Whitaker this morning, she said, before we even landed. I did. You didn't tell me. You had enough to carry, he said simply. I handled what I could handle from my seat. She thought about that for a moment. Thank you, Frank. Don't thank me, he said. This is what it looks like when people do what they're supposed to do. It shouldn't be exceptional. It should be ordinary. A pause. But I'll be there when you need me. In writing, in person, wherever the case goes. It may go to federal court, she said. I know where federal court is, he said dryly. I went there somewhat regularly for decades." She almost laughed. It was the first time all day she had come close to laughing, and the fact that it happened in a conversation with a retired circuit court judge she had met that day on an airplane felt somehow entirely right. She said, "Good night," put the phone down. Tyler came in from George's room where he had been watching television with his uncle, and climbed onto the couch beside his grandmother, and put his head on her shoulder without saying anything. She put her arm around him. After a minute, he said, "Grandma, is great-grandma's necklace gonna be okay?" "Yes, baby. I'm taking it to the jeweler tomorrow." "The one in Harlem?" "Mr. Pearson's son." He nodded slowly. "Is it gonna look the same?" "Exactly the same." "Promise?" She thought about the chain, about the clasp, about the specific place where it had broken, and the fact that gold, properly repaired, leaves no visible mark of what happened to it. She thought about that being either the best or the most complicated metaphor she had encountered in a long time. "I promise," she said. He was asleep shortly after. Later that night, Evelyn sat at Rebecca's kitchen table alone. The apartment was quiet. Rebecca was in her room still working, the light under the door and the occasional low sound of her voice on the phone. George had gone home. The children were asleep. She took the necklace out of her pocket and laid it on the table. She looked at it for a long time. She thought about Eleanor Thompson putting it on the first morning after her own mother gave it to her. She thought about the decades it had spent around Eleanor's neck through everything. Through the Birmingham years and the Montgomery years and the New York years and the hospital years and the last, quiet, difficult years when Eleanor had come to live with Evelyn. And Evelyn had helped her in and out of chairs and made sure the necklace was fastened right every morning. She thought about Rachel Bennett and what she had wanted to accomplish by reaching out and taking it. She thought about whether Rachel understood, even now, what she had actually touched when she touched it, whether she had any comprehension of the full weight of what she had put her hand on. She didn't think so. She thought about Barbara Morrison in a row farther back, calling her daughter, not having an answer. She thought about Brian Ellis, no longer on vacation. She thought about Linda Patterson, civics teacher for decades. Savannah, Georgia, not hard to find. She thought about Lisa Carter filing a complaint and receiving a small credit and keeping her dignity anyway. She thought about Helen Bridges keeping her papers for some time alone, in a drawer somewhere in Memphis, on the specific faith that one day it would matter. She picked up the necklace. She held it in both hands, the broken clasp between her fingers. She thought about her mother's hands, about what Eleanor Thompson had survived, and what she had built from the surviving, and what she had passed forward in the form of a small gold cross, and a way of standing in a room, and a way of breathing when something was trying to get under your skin. Slow, steady from the bottom. She thought about Brooke saying, "I want to be there when you file." She thought about what Brooke would carry forward from this day, and what Tyler would carry, and what the children of Lisa Carter and Helen Bridges would carry, and what Barbara Morrison's 4 grandchildren would carry from the story their grandmother told them. About a day when she was on a plane and she didn't say something and came home and had to sit with that, and then made a call. She thought about all of it, the whole accumulated weight of this one ordinary morning that had become something else entirely. And she felt, for the first time since the incident, something that was not quite peace, but was peace's neighbor. The specific quiet of a person who has done what she needed to do and knows there is more ahead and is ready for it. She set the necklace back on the table. She was going to take it to Mr. Pearson's son in the morning. He was going to fix the clasp. She was going to put it back on. She was going to wear it to the courthouse when James Whitaker filed the complaint. And she was going to wear it to every deposition and every hearing and every day of whatever came next, the same way Eleanor Thompson had worn it every day of her life. Not as a statement, not as a symbol, but simply because it was hers, and it had always been hers, and no one had the right to remove it. Eleanor Thompson had lived through things that should have broken her, and had worn that necklace through all of it without asking anyone's permission. Her daughter intended to do the same. Evelyn Thompson turned off the kitchen light, walked to the window, looked out at the city, and let the day finish around her with the steady, undefeated certainty of a woman who understood in her bones that the most powerful thing she had ever done was simply refuse to take it off. Some moments in life don't just test your strength, they reveal what you're truly made of. Evelyn Thompson's quiet courage on that flight reminds us of one of the most powerful lessons we can ever learn. Your dignity is not negotiable, and the things that carry your family's love and history deserve to be protected, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you something. In the face of disrespect, she didn't raise her voice or lose control. She simply refused to let anyone diminish what mattered most: her mother's necklace, her grandchildren's sense of safety, and the quiet truth that no one has the right to strip away another person's humanity. That kind of steady, rooted strength isn't loud, but it echoes for generations. It teaches our children that standing still with calm conviction can move mountains, and that protecting what you love isn't about winning every battle. It's about refusing to surrender who you are. This story stays with you because it shows that real power often looks like an elderly grandmother holding a broken chain in her palm and still choosing grace over rage. It reminds us that justice isn't always instant, but integrity always leaves a mark. If Evelyn's story touched something deep inside you today, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is one thing in your life that you would never let anyone take from you, no matter the pressure? Share your thoughts. I read every single one. And if you want more stories that celebrate quiet courage and real human strength, make sure you're subscribed and the notification bell is on. We're building a community that refuses to look away. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.